One of the solutions to the shrinking Great Salt Lake that Utah leaders have discussed is a pipeline from the ocean. Many of us have heard about that possibility. It's something California leaders looked at with the shrinking Salton Sea.
Specialist Alex Cabero visited the Salton Sea to find out why California leaders decided no on a pipeline and what lessons Utah leaders could learn from what California looked into.
In many cases, when something is empty, you just fill it back up. It's not that easy, though, when you're talking about a large body of water with receding levels. Utah leaders know that well with the Great Salt Lake, and California leaders have been dealing with it with the Salton Sea here. One thing California leaders looked at and decided not to do for now that Utah leaders have talked about is a pipeline from the ocean.
It wasn't that long ago when Patrick O'Dowd wouldn't have been able to do this.
It's been pretty dramatic.
He would have been underwater.
Even in the last 10 years, the changes that have taken place.
There is no doubt the Salton Sea in Southern California is in trouble.
The bay used to connect to the sea. So this used to be a dock, and the boats used to come into the harbor here.
Water levels have been receding for at least a couple of decades now. And study after study after study prove what so many have seen with their own eyes.
There's data everywhere, right? I mean, that's the challenge with our collective world is we like doing studies, but those studies produce data. It's just a question of what do you do with the data.
O'Dowd is the executive director of the Salton Sea Authority, tasked with making sure the state of California looks at the data and lives up to its promises to help the lake. He says some promises haven't been kept
because of the changes taking place at the sea.
And other plans are behind schedule, while the lake continues to shrink.
Changes we've known about for decades are people's health being adversely affected by those changes. And I can't find the person who will answer that question clearly and succinctly.
The health concerns come from exposed lake bed, which increases as the lake decreases. When the wind blows, so does the dust and chemicals from agricultural runoff in that dust.
It's scary.
Ida Palomino is with a group dedicated to representing people who live in nearby communities, people who breathe in that dust.
It's not necessarily asthma, it's an asthma-related illness, and you see that more prevalent in younger children.
One idea to get rid of the exposed lake bed where the dust comes from is to fill the Salton Sea back up with water. And several groups have said the fastest way to do that is with a pipeline or canal from the Sea of Cortez about 100 miles south.
It's relatively easy to do from an engineering standpoint. It's mostly downhill.
It's an idea Chuck Parker loves.
This old idea, we're trying to revive it.
He's with the Salton Sea Coalition, a group that has spent the past 5 years trying to get community support for a pipeline plan.
But, you know, as of the end of last year, the state decided, no, we're not going to do that.
The state had a panel look into the idea, but said it would harm the environment, take too long to build, and costs would be in the tens of billions of dollars. Parker disagrees.
The longer you put it off, the more expensive and the more difficult it gets to fix it.
And unlike the Great Salt Lake, hoping for more rain and a heavier snowpack at the Salton Sea aren't options.
But the difference between this and the Great Salt Lake and Walker Lake and other similar lakes is this is 100% agricultural return flow. Rains seldom even get here. Right? They'll end up in the groundwater basin.
So for now, there will be more studies and more planning. And unlike the Great Salt Lake, the Salton Sea seemingly doesn't have any political allies to try and do whatever it takes.
If you're willing to pay for it, you can get the water. The battle is for the first drop of water, not the last drop of water.
It would certainly take a lot more to get a pipeline to Utah, including going up a mile in elevation to get it to the Great Salt Lake. If it's too costly for California, the cost for Utah would be even more so. However, engineers say it could be done. It's just a matter of how much do you want to spend, and is it truly the only option? At the Salton Sea in Southern California, Alex Cabrera, KSL 5 News.